Senior Counsel Stanley Moore is a stalwart in the legal profession, but if you ask him, he would quickly tell you about all those legal luminaries responsible for molding and shaping him into the attorney at law he is today. In this episode of One-on-One, we get to know the man behind the silk. I'm Felicia Valenzuela. Thanks for joining us. Sitting across from the Honorable Senior Counsel couldn't feel more surreal, but his calmness and pleasant smile is more than welcoming. So we begin our interview with my first question. How did you become interested in law?
Well, I became interested in law when I was in primary school, I suppose. I was rather talkative, as they say, and liked a debate or an argument or a discussion. And gradually, through high school, I drifted in that direction, I would say, although I had one or two diversions from here and there.
As he said, law was put on the back burner. Just out of high school, the young Stanley Moore would try his hand at teaching.
Well, when I first started to work after leaving school, I became a pupil teacher in the same primary school, St. James de Les Anglican, which is now known as the F.E. Pollard School. I had in all a year of teaching at St. James and St. Barnabas. And then I went to the Department of Customs and Excise. I became a customs officer for 7 years. Then there was something known in those days as the Booker Cadetship, which was a sort of cadetship program run by the Booker Group of companies. I was fortunate to be appointed as a Booker cadet. And there I was being trained to become a business manager. But then the pull of the law remained strong. And so while both at the Customs Department and at Booker's, I began to study for the LLB degree as an external student of London University. Well, I began studying in Guyana here as an external student of London University. In those days, you bought one textbook per subject, or you got what is known as a correspondence course. But I was fortunate to belong to a class of students where we had the greatest tutor we could have imagined, the late Frederick Rudolph Wills, who was a Guyana scholar.
Frederick Rudolph Wills was a Foreign Affairs Minister of Ghana in the 1970s. Now back to our subject. Justice Moore is one of only 2 students who completed the LLB degree in what was then British Guyana as an external student of London University. We find out now what the learned attorney at law holds most dear about his profession.
What I hold most dear is the number of mentors that I've had in the legal profession, starting with Fred Wills, and next must come Rex Herbert McKay, Senior Counsel, who is still, since about 1958 or thereabout, up to this day, one of my great mentors and friends and guides in the legal profession as well as in life.
Justice Moore was called to the bar in July of 1970.
I have the honor of being petitioned, or my petition being sponsored by 2 of the greatest lawyers of all time in Guyana. And my petitioner was the late Joseph Oscar Fitzclarence Haynes. And his junior, who was then not yet senior counsel, was Rex Herbert McKay. And I do not think I could have had any 2 greater sponsors, perhaps equally good, but none greater. It was a feeling of achievement and a feeling of hope and expectation. And here you are at the starting gates, and you want to get off to a good start, and you want to run your race well. And I was very lucky in that I had a number of friends and mentors and patrons. I mean, for example, Rex McKay said to me, "Do not stay in England and wait for your call there. Come home right away." So I was called in England one day, and they sent a telegram, as there was in those days. And I was called a few days later in Guyana. In those days, many people still came home by steamer.
As we backtrack a bit, we find out what Justice Moore enjoyed most during his school days.
One of the things that I enjoyed most in school was play.
Of course. You had a favorite sport?
Well, yes, I tried everything. I wasn't very good at many things, but I mean, I tried, I played nonetheless. And we had great fun in primary school, and not so much in secondary school, because then, of course, you were looking upward now to your tertiary education and all that.
Senior Counsel Stanley Moore is passionate about the arts with a special love for theatre. As our interview progressed, I asked him about his time serving as Minister of Home Affairs, which is the modern-day Ministry of Public Security, and specifically his time serving on the late President LFS Burnham.
One of the big principles upon which I approach any office, whatever it might be, is the principle that you are in a position to serve and you are rendering service. So whether I was Minister of Home Affairs, or whether I was a practicing attorney at the bar, or whether I was a judge of the Court of Appeal, you're simply rendering judicial services to the public. It's not about you, it's not about your ego, it's not about your personality. It is how you render service, effective service, which is needed by the members of the public with whom you come into contact. Well, I also met Dr. Jagan. I met President Burnham, of course, in the village of Kitty, where we both grew up. Dr. Jagan lived in Kitty for a while, very near to where I lived. And therefore, he also is one of the great heroes of Guyana.
The work of the Senior Counsel stretched beyond Ghana as he worked throughout the Caribbean and on the African continent.
The big turn in my life was when my wife, Cheryl Gwyneth Liana Moore Nee Pickering, in pursuit of her career, took an appointment as a pilot of LIAT, which based her in Antigua. And of course, the next thing is, could you also find a situation in Antigua? The short answer is that I couldn't. And the nearest situation I could find closest to Antigua is in Montserrat. That is how I became the principal Crown Counsel in Montserrat in 1990. Fortunately, they say preparation plus opportunity equals success. The preparation had been there in this great school of learning in Guyana. And the opportunity came when my boss, the Attorney General, was promoted to become a judge. Incidentally, he is another Guyanese, the late Odell Adams. And I was appointed Attorney General in 1992 of Montserrat. And 2 years later, I was appointed a judge of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. All these things just seemed to fall into place. If I'd sat down and planned them, I don't think they could have gone any better. So fortune plays a part in all this. My first judicial appointment was here in Guyana in 1979, where I acted as a judge for 3 months. I was offered a permanent appointment, which I couldn't afford to take because I had children, mortgages, this, that, and the other. But in 1992, I was appointed a judge of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court and posted to Grenada. Spent 4 years in Grenada, then posted to the British Virgin Islands. While in the British Virgin Islands, I was directed by the Chief Justice to go to St. Kitts to do a case there. And then when I retired, or perhaps when I went on my pre-retirement leave, and the day when I went on pre-retirement leave from the British Virgin Islands, I was being sworn in as a judge of the Supreme Court of the Bahamas. And I spent 2.5, roughly 3 years in the Bahamas. So that took me to the end of 2002. And then sometime in 2004, I was attending a meeting in St. Lucia of the Commonwealth Judicial Educational Institute, of which I'm a fellow, where I met 3 distinguished personalities from the Union of South Africa. Justice Johan Kriegler, who is a member of the Constitutional Court of South Africa, Judge Fritz Brandt, who's a member of the Supreme Court of Appeal in South Africa, and Mrs. Cecile van Riet, who was the chief of the Justice College. I didn't deliver paper, I didn't make a speech. I may have contributed to discussions. The short of it is they invited me to South Africa, all expenses paid, to tour the country, talk to people about judicial education.
Senior counsel Stanley Moore served as a judge in the Court of Appeal in Botswana and later appointed to the Supreme Court in Swaziland. Before we wrapped up our interview, we spoke a little about the personal life of the legal stalwart, whose love for his family was very evident. And this is how Justice Moore met his lovely wife.
I first met her when I was teaching as a lecturer at the University of Guyana. She was in the Department of Political Science and Law. And I went into the office for some reason, which I can't now remember. But what I do remember is really being attracted to this beautiful young lady. Things proceeded slowly, but on the 9th of December 1972, we went out for the first time. And we are still together now in 2019. Well, we now have 4. We had 5. 1 passed away this year, sadly. Of the 5, 2 are our biological children. I was married before. But she must qualify to be one of the greatest stepmothers in the world, because she loved them all, and she brought them all up, and she cares for them all till now. And we have 6 grandchildren, including the one who now lives in Guyana. The others are all abroad.
As he remains dedicated about practicing law, Justice Moore says he's especially pleased to see the shift taking place in society today of more women breaking the barrier and taking up leading roles. Thanks for watching.